Chargers Now is presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Will Ortner, and today we are going to be discussing Mel Kiper Jr.'s draft grades for the Los Angeles Chargers because sometimes Mel Kiper, he can be a little bit hard on players. Sometimes he can be a little bit hard on teams. Is he going to be hard on the Chargers? I think that the Chargers ended up actually doing fairly well, and Mel Kiper, for the most part, agreed with me, but he did have some things that he wanted them to improve upon. Let's take a look at our sub battle, though, before we dive into the real nitty gritty of everything happening with the Chargers. Ended up winning the sub battle. What a big deal for us. The little engine that could, the Chiefs report, Raiders report, and Broncos breakdown, they've been around for quite a while. So the fact that we're even in a competition with them when it comes to subscribers is always going to be a big deal. But what's even more important to me is the fact that we came in there and absolutely kicked their behind. I freaking love that. Thank you to everyone who subscribed. If you haven't already and this is your first time checking out our videos, hit that sub button now. So Kiper was very locked in on what the Chargers needed to do to grow as an organization, but also what was the biggest glaring need around this team. And that, of course, is, well, find a way to protect Justin Herbert. The Chargers absolutely under no circumstances could let Justin Herbert get hit as often as he got hit in 25 next season. He took a career-high 54 sacks, and the offensive line had the worst pass block win rate in the NFL at just 53.9%. That was Mel Kiper Jr. in his article on the biggest need for the Chargers. He came up with 4 other needs, though, for the Chargers. It wasn't just guard. The Chargers need to go and get an edge rusher, safety, linebacker, and defensive tackle, or get a couple of these. And general manager Joe Ortiz made it clear that he wanted to use the draft to try and help address these issues. So the question ends up being asked, well, did the Chargers address these needs and address these issues? I'll let you know if they did here in just a moment, or at least according to Mel Kiper Jr. But first, I need to let you know that today's show is made possible by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app and is the best place to win cash while watching sports. With playoff basketball finally here, there's no better time to cash in than with our friends at Prize Picks. And I'll tell you this, the app is really easy to use. To qualify for a Prize Picks lineup, pick 2 to 6 players and select more or less on stat projections, including points, rebounds, assists, three-pointers, hits, home runs, strikeouts, and several others across all major sports. With a new social feeds feature, you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups with a single click. That includes me, of course, and producer Searle. You follow us on Prize Picks, and you get the picks before they even get posted on the show. I have a lineup for the basketball action going on later on. CJ McCollum, more on his points. Josh Hart, more on his rebounds. Karl Anthony Towns, more on his points, rebounds, and assists. New user offer. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks. Clickable link to download the app is in the comments and description. So let's start out with what Mel Kiper Jr. liked early on. He liked the Akeem Mesidor pick. And, well, of course, I think he was hoping, and I was hoping, and you were probably hoping, that the Chargers were going to be able to get Vega Ione, the guard from Penn State. Unfortunately, he was already off the board at 22, and so the Chargers went with their next best option, and Kiper Jr. thought it was a pretty smart decision. Mesidor is an older prospect with 12.5 sacks last season, and the bend, burst, and power to consistently annoy opposing QBs. Teamed up with Khalil Mack and Thule, there is a lot of upside. And I couldn't agree more. You just look at the stats last year where he was healthy opposite of Ruben Bain, and Mesidor was an absolute game wrecker. Did well in the run-stopping game, did well in getting sacks, a ton of pressures, forced a ton of fumbles, man. Akeem Mesidor, I'm very high on. I got to watch him in person at the Cotton Bowl. He was un-effing believable. I loved it. In my personal opinion, this edge group is absolutely nasty. And I think that adding Mesidor fulfills what they had been missing once Odafe Oweh ended up leaving this team in NFL free agency. And instead of paying $100 million to Oweh, I think you're going to get a similar player, maybe even a better version of that player if he stays healthy, and you're going to get him for really, really freaking cheap. Do you like the Mesidor pick? Let me know down below, yes or no, in the comment section. Very interested in what the Chargers faithful have to say. I think it's actually a really, really good pick. And I get it. He's a little bit older, but the only person who should be upset about people being 25 years old is Leonardo DiCaprio when he's dating them. If you don't get that joke, ask your wife or mom. Brenen Thompson. Let's talk about him next because Mel Kiper Jr. really, really liked what the speedy wide receiver from Mississippi State has to say and what he can be adding to a team. We know that Mel Kiper Jr. is a big fan of Thompson because he had this to say. The Brenen Thompson pick was fun. He can fly, running a 4.26 at the combine, but he has a lot of untapped potential as a return man too. He went for 1,054 yards last season. The 5'9", 164-pound slot receiver could be a reliable outlet for Herbert. Last year, Mississippi State was not a very good football team. That doesn't mean that Thompson wasn't a very good football player. I thought he was very efficient when he had the football. Has a high yards per average there. When the ball's in his hand, man, that guy was electric and he could make some big plays. Has a high drop rate. Don't really love that. But otherwise, what's not to like about this kid? Other than he's, maybe a little bit small. He's going to be really fun in Mike McDaniel's offense. We know that Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, smaller, faster wide receivers over at Miami, had a ton of success with McDaniel. I think the same thing is going to end up happening here with Thompson, and he can reach his full potential alongside Ladd McConkey. Last, let's talk about Jake Slaughter. I know there's a lot of people that are slaughtering this pick, but not everybody. Thanks, producer Earl. He played the drums on the other side. But I don't think that people realize just how strong Slaughter can end up being for this team and how versatile he's going to be. Look, he's not going to be a center right away, in my personal opinion, or at least he'll be a backup. So he's going to be competing for that guard spot. But eventually, at some point, if Tyler Biadasz leaves or he ends up getting banged up, ends up getting hurt, well, now you have a clear backup because you didn't really have that before. Here's what Kiper Jr. had to say on Slaughter. The Chargers did make an effort to address the interior on day 2, landing Jake Slaughter. He's one of my favorite players to watch in this class. I know Los Angeles has Biadasz, but Slaughter has the ability to step in as a rookie and start. He has 33 SEC starts under his belt, and he's a powerful dude with solid mobility for a 6'5", 303-pound frame. You don't see a lot of guards that are that tall, so the fact that Slaughter's able to have the hip mobility to get low enough to get under the pads of opposing defensive linemen, that's a really big frickin' deal. So while I know there are some not-so-great Senior Bowl clips going around right now, I do think at least if he's able to play more like he did at Florida, I think the Chargers got a good one there. Let me know who your favorite pick of the 2026 NFL Draft was for the Chargers. Very interested in what the people have to say. I know that mine is pretty obvious. I love Akeem Mesidor. I think he's going to be fantastic for this team, and I thought that the Chargers got a real steal. What Kiper didn't like about this Chargers draft was he felt like they didn't get enough guards, or at least they waited until too late. On day 2, you get a guy in Jake Slaughter who is a pretty good offensive lineman, more of a center than a guard, but will easily slot into guard and play a lot. But really the issue was that the Chargers waited until later on in the draft, round 6, before they ended up getting their guards. When we look at the first 4 picks for the Chargers, obviously they addressed a lot of areas of need for this team, but you can see, other than Slaughter, there aren't really any big offensive interior linemen. Travis Burke, he isn't going inside to guard. He is a swing tackle. He could potentially end up being a tackle for this team that is a starter, depending on injuries or just how he progresses. But Travis Burke, that kid is way too big to be on the interior. When you look at day 2, that's where you see the guards go off the board. Logan Taylor and Alex Harkey are the interior linemen that the Chargers decide to go out and get. I like all these picks. In fact, I like Taylor and I like Harkey. I think that they'll be able to come in and do a lot of really good things for this team. But to sit here and say that it was perfect, I kind of get where Kiper's coming from there. Now, he ended up giving the Chargers a B on his grading system. I think that's largely fair, although I personally would say that General Manager Joe Hortiz should get a B+, maybe an A-. He should maybe even an A+. When you start looking at it, what'd you have to replace? Well, interior offensive line, you got a bunch of those guys. You got a better backup offensive tackle now who's going to be able to swing either side depending on if there is an injury to Slater or an injury to Alt, things that have been happening more and more recently. You got edge rushers, you got safety help. Your safety group is a lot younger, and that's not even counting your UDFAs, which I thought that Ortiz did a good job there. So the more and more that I start talking myself into this, the more and more I'm thinking that maybe just maybe, Mel Kiper Jr. might be a little bit off his rocker, and that grade should have been a lot higher, closer to an A minus, maybe even an A. Thank you guys so much for viewing today's video. Really hope you enjoyed the content that we put out on the channel. We got Chargers videos every single day for you. You don't want to miss. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Make sure that you bolt up.